But I was thinking, I mean, in a sense, there are a set of experiences which I think sensitized me to problems of inequality. And that was probably this passage through these very different schools that I was describing yesterday, for having experienced really a very much a working class London school, and then ending up in St Paul's, which I suppose was about one of the most privileged schools you could possibly be. So I'd really seen the spectrum of schools, and it made you aware of the differences in life chances that were linked to that. But the other set of experiences, which I think made me particularly interested in work, was going. The first was when I went to India at the age of 13. My mother had this view that I should experience the world early, and sent me on my own to be met by somebody in India. And this person turned out to run a tea plantation in Assam. And there, I mean, I was really very... Well, first of all, I spent some time wandering around Calcutta, because I wasn't met as I was supposed to be met in the airport. And that, of course, was a terrific shock, the poverty of Calcutta, with the refugees that had come down after the sort of Chinese engagement in northern Assam. But then the tea plantation was run in the most brutal way. I mean, it was a very much an authoritarian regime where the owners treated the people on the plantation as really sort of semi-slaves, as far as I could see. I can remember one incident where I was in the jeep with him driving down one of these sort of small alleys between the tea bushes, and there were a group of people, women, children, men, chatting in this alley, and he just drove at, increased the speed as he approached them. He said, "Oh, they'll jump out of the way." So that was very striking, and it made me aware of just how people who've got a lot of power can be quite vicious in the way they use it. Then, of course, I had previously had the experience of this prep school that I mentioned to you, which was also run on very authoritarian grounds. So I think I was very interested to go to a kibbutz where I heard that there was a much more democratic culture of how you ran an organisation. And one of my Jewish friends precisely had a contact with a person called Greville Janner, who you may have heard of.
Yes.
Who ran an organisation called The Bridge in Britain. And he was very, very well connected. So he organised this. I did, first of all, a tour through Syria and Jordan, but ended up in Israel, going to this kibbutz, where I spent about a month, really. And that was a very interesting experience, I thought. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, I think there was a much higher level of real democracy within the organisation than you'd find in most other work organisations, because it wasn't perfect. It wasn't totally pure, because the elders had quite a say. I mean, it was a sort of informal sort of autoritas of the elders, which was quite powerful. But it was also very interesting from the point of view of the children, of the way they brought up children, who were still at that time put collectively to be brought up. I mean, the mothers put them into a collective centre, I think, on the third month. What was interesting there was, in a sense, they were all convinced that this was very good for the children, that it sort of broke them away from, the dependence on their parents, and made them tougher sorts of people as well. But the mothers couldn't stand it. So they were going to demolish this, and I think they did after I'd left, because it was too emotionally difficult for the mothers. So it was quite an interesting experience.
Very interesting.
It was also the place over lunch I was telling you about the fact that it was Kfar Hanasi, which was an English settlement where they kept the traditions of the British tea. Kfar Hanasi. It was near Galilee.
How do you spell that?
Kefar, and then a Hanasi must have been Hanaswe. And where they still had the traditional British tea from the 1920s. Very interesting.
Yes, fascinating.
But quite a lot of my work has been about problems of power structures in organisations and the opportunities for people to participate in decisions that sort of matter to their lives. And And certainly these, I think, this was quite an important sort of influence. Thinking on that.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't think I've ever found an organisation apart from Nuffield College which runs as democratically as a kibbutz.